Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pets, People, Life, and Longevity. I am Jan Jarmias, and I am here with my canine companion, Tonka. And we'll see whether he's going to be quiet today or decide he's going to chime in somewhere along in our conversation today. A little bit about me. I'm a trained scientist who began exploring holistic and alternative healing about 18 years ago. I began my journey with the use of essential oils and then explored other modalities such as Reiki, gentle massage, and other modalities for pets and people. I do work with people occasionally. I'm the co-author of the top-selling essential oil book for pets called Spoil Your Pet, a practical guide to using essential oils in dogs and cats. And today I would like to welcome to the show Bill Correll. And so I'm so excited that Bill is here. And I'll tell you a little bit about Bill and how we met. So Bill is a man of many talents and many gifts. And one of his gifts, or I think it's his ability to listen and his ability to bring a fresh perspective to a conversation and to a situation. He's a certified life and business coach and has been consulting with a host of professionals and organizations for projects and on development goals. I am blessed to have the gift of being on Bill's podcast each week, Lighting the Candle, a world that works. And which is now, 130 something episodes now, Bill?
I think the next one posted will be 130.
So up along past like a few years, it's been going on. I've been on for, I think, almost a year now. Kind of crazy.
Yeah, sounds right.
And so welcome, Bill, to the show. And thanks for getting on.
Well, thanks for having me, Jan. Here we are. It's New Year's Eve. Another year's gone by very, very quickly. And I can't wait to talk about, all the things that we have in common that we don't get to explore when we're on my podcast or just exchanging texts back and forth.
No, absolutely. And one of the shared passions is when I was in conversation with you one day, you were talking about cats and the fact that you had so many cats through the years. I don't think you have any at the moment.
We are catless at the moment for the first time since my wife and I have been together in 48 years.
And I'm catless for the first time, like in 30 something years.
Yeah. Yeah. I would definitely put myself among the class of expert pet owners.
Well, then that's a great thing to be, especially if you're sharing with our audience today. And so maybe we'll go through a little bit about why cats, if you've ever had dogs.
Yeah, we have. We definitely have had dogs.
And why cats seem to predominate, or whether dogs predominated too, and why that is for you guys, do you think?
Pretty simply put, we always had dogs and cats when I was growing up. And then when my wife and I met, and we got our first apartment together, she had come from a farm background and raised with all kinds of different animals around her. Always, one or two dogs and usually a half dozen cats, just all around the farm. And so when we started feeding this stray that we thought, we called her Kiki. It was the Kiki is the mother of all cats in our family tree. And she came to our door and she just looked so forlorn. It was wintertime and January and cold. And so we brought her in and she just was so friendly and loving. And then the next thing we know, we find out that Kiki actually has a home across the street, like 2 doors down on the other side of the street. And she is one of the best conniving moochers, that the world has ever seen. So that was our first cat together.
That's very funny that she had a home. It's just like, it's hysterical because it's very like, I don't know, it really is this conniving way of getting into your heart and getting, more food and more love. Yep. And, That's hysterical. I remember my first cat. I don't remember where we got her. I remember she was all black, and my brother named her Puff after the Dick Jane Spot books, which the cat's name was Puff. And so that's where and she was hit by a car. And I remember, I don't remember that much like about the details. I was pretty young, but I do remember that she died. And then it was quite a while before we got another pet. But did you have so predominantly you said for over 40 years or since you and Janet have been together. So has it been like consecutively that you've always had cats, or did you have periods during that time when?
We were never without a cat during that entire period of time. We've lost count, but Janet's got to be somewhere close to 30 or 35 cats all throughout all of the years. And that's not counting, the soup kitchen that we had for years and years on our back porch, right? So let me tell you what, the rest of the Kiki story and how we started to get more than one cat at a time. So unfortunately, we got the little neighborhood girl who was about 7 years old came and knocked on the door and said, "I got really bad news for you. The cat you call Kiki, she was mauled by a German Shepherd, and she's very, very ill right now. We have her at the vet, and we'll keep you posted, on what's going on with that." Well, of course, she didn't make it, but she had a litter of kittens, before she had to run in with the dog. And so, to kind of heal our broken hearts, they offered us the pick of the litter. And there were like 7 or 8 cats. And we took the runt. It was this tiny little, buff tiger. He was really struggling to get over there and get to mom's belly, and he wasn't working out real well. So we said, that's the one we're going to take, and we'll take him as soon as he's weaned. Let's let him, get to a certain size. And he was probably about a month old or so when we finally did take him home. But we babied him, and his name was Binnix. And he was a sketch and a half. He was, really a terror. He would bounce around the apartment, off walls, scrambling up, our legs. We was only, this big, but scrambling onto the bed sheets and what have you, and screaming the whole time he's doing it. And I mean, literally, he would run around the corner and he would hit the wall sideways on his feet and then bounce off of it and go into the bedroom. So we're both going to college at the time, and somebody said, well, if you want to calm, a male cat down while it's still a juvenile, get another cat. So we got another one, and this was a gray tiger, and her name was Fawn. And so Binnix and Fawn, and to kind of complete the story, how we, we used to have little sayings for all of our cats, as I'm sure most of your listeners do. But the point is that there was a show in the 60s called Ricochet Rabbit. Bing, 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 Ricochet Rabbit. Well, we were going bing, 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 Ricochet Binnix. And that's how he got his name and how it stuck. And it was kind of funny because my friends would butcher that name. They would know that it was offbeat and didn't mean anything. And they'd come over and they'd call him Sclaber, or, it was fun. So I'll take a breath because that's the mom and the pop after Kiki of the rest of what happened. And then they ended up having a litter with 4 kittens, et cetera, et cetera. But there'll be more stories to come along. I think the amazing thing is that runt of the litter lived for 16 years old, and he grew to be really big. He was probably 2 feet long and weighed about 21 pounds. A big muscular boy. Well,
first of all, it is a true testimonial to, care and love, and the fact that, sometimes the smallest will grow to be the largest and can overcome, and probably energetically and personality wise gave him a lot of fortitude to carry on and become who he was yes. That kind of spunkiness that he had. I've had a number of cats, and I think what's always interesting is the difference in personalities that they have. There really are total individual personalities.
Yeah. Yeah, when you get a population like we've had, there are some that are comparative and similar, but you're absolutely correct. Every last one of them is unique as a fingerprint.
Just like people, which is why I love pets. They're such a great, or pets. They're such a great example for us. They, yeah, through the years, my first cat as an adult was a cat I got at a tax sale in Brooklyn Heights. They were giving away kittens, and I remember thinking that she was absolutely adorable because she was climbing up like the fence or something. Well, that was kind of a sign. I should have taken the very mellow one, but yeah, I would come home and I remember not being able to find her. Like, she wasn't that big. I lived in a 2-room apartment. It wasn't
Sure.
like it was that large. And she had crawled up inside the back of the sofa. And I saw these claw marks coming in. And I was like, it's just like, and they're so mischievous and like true explorationers.
Yeah.
And were your cats always indoor outdoor cats, or did you have mainly?
Well, originally they were pretty much all indoor outdoor cats. And it's kind of interesting because after we had the litter, there were four kittens, two females and two males. And the kittens came out. One of them was Calico, and she had a umbilical hernia, so we called her the hernia kid, Nernina. And then there was another one that was just jet black, and his name was Spider. And the other female, whose name was Mouse, because she looked like Minnie Mouse, So we got together in 75, 76, and these cats were all adolescent, for the storm of 78. And there were two of them that went missing, and one was gone for 4 days. And the first one came back after the first night, but we were concerned as all get out about all of them. And so now we've got 6 cats. We got the mom and the dad, and we got a litter of 4 kittens, and one's missing for 4 days. And I don't know if you remember the blizzard of 78. We had payloaders and backhoes stacking snow down at the end of the street into a parking lot, and that was 25, 30 feet high. It was absolutely incredible, and so we didn't hold out much hope. And it was actually the hernia kid that was gone for 4 days. And she came trooping in on the day, on the 4th day. And man, we just cried when she came through the door. It was so good to see her. And the funny thing about her, she was such a spunky cat. I mean, she would fight squirrels. She'd stand dogs down, and, just, she had a lot of Binnick's chutzpah, and Fawn was so meek and so timid and, real sweet girl. Right. So, yeah. And the neat part of this was we had lived in an apartment on a street in town here on the 2nd floor. And that's where we started having our cats. And then we found out that the house across the street, which was very tiny, probably all in maybe 900 square feet on 2 floors, right? And so when we found out that it was available, it was $15 a month more than the rent that we were paying. And then we had a whole house to ourselves, right? No yard or anything like that, but a driveway. And so we moved by carrying all of our furniture and stuff down the stairs, across the street, and into the house. And so now we had to retrain the cats to come to our house where we were now, instead of going back to the old door to come in, right? So I told you that story to explain to you why we weren't quite sure if we'd ever see Eddie again during that storm period. And our neighbor across the street, who took one of the kitties and wound up raising it as his own, he said, "I thought I saw her." And so that kept hope alive. And then she came back. She was very, nonplussed and everything. Up here, better feed me,
I just remember what was amazing when I had my growing up, my cats were always indoor, outdoor cats. As an adult, I've only had indoor cats.
Yeah.
And I remember we would drive up the street and be like, the car would be, like half a dozen houses away from our house.
Yeah.
And we would see the cat kind of bolt to the house. And we were like, how'd you know it was us? Out of all that, cars went down the street all the time. I mean, we didn't live on we didn't live on a busy street, but we didn't live on a quiet street.
Right.
And it would be like, all of a sudden she would hear the car and she'd go, like, you'd see her run across the street or run from 5 houses down to the front, and wait for us. It was amazing to me. As a kid, I remember seeing her bolt across and just say, she must be able to tell the car. Obviously, there might be something else that their senses are so much more magnified than ours that
it's true. It really is. So the story gets better from there. And probably later on in 1978, we wound up looking for a home because that was February of 78 when the blizzard was, if I remember correctly. And we started looking for a home to buy, and we found one over on like 5 blocks away from where we were. It was a really nice little house. It was 2 families, so it was income producing. Had a full basement garage. All of the basement that you drove into was all garage, and then up from there. So Jan's parents found out that we were looking to buy a home, and her mother insisted that we buy the home where we are right now that's been in their family since the 1890s. And so now we moved from this little less than 1,000 square foot, where the second floor is basically one big bedroom, and that's it. And now we've got this behemoth of a house that's 2,900 square feet on 2.5 acres of land with a barn and a garage. And so my theorem about cats expanding to fill the space available ultimately came true, right? So now we've got our 4 cats. One of them we wound up losing. Mouse was constantly going back down the hill, and we'd see her, and then she'd come home, and then she wouldn't come home, and then finally one day she didn't come home. But everybody else ended up sticking around. And of course, then we had the cats that would show up on the back porch, and look through the window at our cats on the inside. And one guy was white with dark spots on him, and we called him Freddie the Freeloader because all we had to do was put a little bit of food out on the deck, and he'd eat it all up and then go away. We wouldn't see him for a couple of days. Then he came back and he became part of the family. So now we're in this big old house, and we're right near the university. Eastern Connecticut State University is 1 block away, the north entrance to campus. And I'll be darned if each year when the kids graduated, if cats didn't just show up on our block. I mean, they would bring them over and they would drop them off, and then they'd drive off into their lives, but the cats would be left behind. So there was one time where we wound up, more cats inside through various means. Our kids were, getting kitty cats from other kids and that sort of thing. So now we had 8 cats that we called our own. These were our indoor-outdoor cats, right? And so if one of them didn't make it home before we went to bed, we put a heated water bowl outside, and then we bought this thing that held 5 pounds of Purina cat chow, right? And it had it was an injection molded thing, and had a little door, so we wound up having all kinds of kitty cats, on our back porch, which we lovingly called that the soup kitchen.
The soup kitchen. I found my second cat as a kid. We had a cat that hung around my elementary school, and it was February vacation. It was, President's Week, and everybody at school, we'd been feeding it. And I said to my mother, we won't be there for a week. He's going to starve. And what's going to happen? They're going to take him to a shelter, and then who knows? And my mother said to me, thinking that it was never going to happen. She said, well, if the Friday, before we go on vacation, if you can find him, we'll take him home. And she said she went and picked me up, and there I was standing with the cat. She said it was the ugliest thing on the face of the earth, but I thought it was beautiful. And we ended up having her for probably till I went to college. We had that cat. And so I always, when they want to be found, they'll be found. And and they know where to go. It's really interesting. Like you said, that they would end up on your block, and even if kids didn't drop them off, they probably would have ended up there anyway.
There was probably a hobo's mark out on the front of the the property somewhere.
I was going to say there's probably a little memo that went out. If you need food and shelter, please go to this block. Go to Bill's house.
Yeah, out on the feline internet. Yeah,
exactly, right on the feline internet. Love that. So, with all these cats, and obviously, so as an adult, did you ever have any dogs along the mix with as an adult, like on your own, or did you basically have cats?
We had one dog, and we got her from some friends, and she was an absolutely beautiful mongrel. And what we did with all of our cats, when we got new cats after we'd had our first litter, they came, from somewhere else. We got all their shots, and we had them spayed or neutered. And that way we were not adding to the cat population, because there were a lot of cats in the city at that point. So we finally get a puppy. It came from my wife's cousin, Ronnie. Their dog had a litter, and so we went over and we got this beautiful little bundle of joy. Part Cocker Spaniel, part Lab, little longer coat, but we didn't know any of that when we first got her. And we named her Hildegard von Pup Pup, Hildy for short. And that came from Hildegard Hamhocker, on Tumbleweeds, that look the cartoon.
I don't know it, but I love the name anyway. So
Hildegard is really something special, right? Yeah, like a Valkyrie. So Hildy, she was going through puppy time when Heidi was around 2, and Jan was pregnant with our number 2 daughter, Becky. And Hildy had this habit of jumping up on Heidi, and Heidi would sit there and she would just bawl, and she'd go, "I don't like my puppy." Part of the thing is we put Heidi in her high chair and then give her Cheerios, and of course she'd drop the Cheerios on the floor, and where's the dog? The dog is scarfing them down.
That's right, exactly.
So we had a house full of kids when Jan became pregnant with Heidi. She stopped working, and we opened a daycare, a little bit later. And my nieces and nephews, the people that lived in the area, my brothers and sisters, their kids, they would drop them off over here, and we'd take care of them. And then we had maybe 4 or 5 other kids that we got paid to be in our daycare system. Big yard, lots of plastic, brightly colored toys for kids to ride around and play on and have a ball. And tons of animals, and neighborhood dogs came over too. The neighborhood dogs would come to our house, and play with Hildy and the kids.
So you not only had a daycare, but you had a doggy daycare. So
from time to time. Oh yeah, Hildy was a special dog, and when she got to be about 2 years old, she developed this relationship with the UPS driver, and we had these aluminum screen doors on the front of the so the guy's name was Randy, and he enjoyed the heck out of really stimulating this dog, because that dog would hit that door like wham, and all this kind of stuff, and Randy would be going, "Nice to see you too." back into the UPS truck. So it got to the point the minute the dog heard the UPS truck off in the distance, she would start going to the door. It'd get, all angry and barking and all that kind of stuff. And then he'd come and he'd egg her on. And you know what? After a time, she got out one day and she went over to him and she just kind of like doing one of these routines with a tail and all the rest of that. And he reached down and petted her and he said, "You really are a good dog, aren't you?" But we were sure she was going to go for the throat. Nobody, she never did.
She never did. It's really interesting as dogs and their ability, and their ability or their instinctual idea of protection and what that means. And sometimes it's, well, I can bark really loud,
right,
and people get the message, and I don't really need to do any more than that.
Yeah.
I don't need to assert myself any more than that. I just need to let them know who I am and what I stand for.
Yeah.
And Tonka's not aggressive, but he will stand his own. Like if he doesn't like, if another dog is bothering him, he's very clear. Like he'll let out a growl or a nip, and it's kind of like, hey, buddy, don't push me. I don't want it. It used to make me laugh because having had cats and dogs, and my cats always got along great with him, and he loved the cats, but one of my cats was like a real nudge. Yeah. Such a pest. Oh my gosh. He was, it was loving, but very high maintenance. And every now and then, like he'd be over at Tonka and he'd be nudging him and everything. And finally Tonka would let out this, and he would go, okay, he's had enough. He needs space.
Yep, out of the pool.
That's right, out of the pool. But it's amazing how, did they always all get along?
Well, see, now that's very interesting because the core group of animals always got along. And then every once in a while, what we would call the usurpers, some cat with attitude would come in, into the zone and start to be a regular at the soup kitchen. And we had a cat whose name was, I don't know about you, but nicknaming your animals over the period of time that you have them. And I always was a big one for nicknaming my daughters at different times, different things as well. But we had a cat named Patches, who also got to be a pretty big boy. And around the time that Benix was maybe 14 or 15 years old, Patches came in. And then 2 or 3 years after Patches was here, there was a black Persian cat that was a stray, because he obviously had no collar or license or anything of that nature, and he was here all the time. And he was one of the frequent in the shelter in the back. The barn became kind of a cat place to go and be safe during the wintertime. We actually even took some bales of hay and put it down on the made a little bed for them to lie in if they wanted to. So Pat became Patches, who became like Patchouli, Chulo, Sieber, Thiebington, the progression of nicknames, right? So we lovingly referred to him as the Thieber, and Cat, we just called him Cat. My older daughter called Cat Mustafa, because he just had this jowly looking face. He was a beautiful boy, but he just rubbed Patches the wrong way. And Patches and he would have these things going back and forth. And it sounded like they were killing each other, but no, they did mostly talking. They almost never fought. So that was one that was really quite noteworthy. And they lasted, as each one being the the arch nemesis of the other for almost 10 years. And they never did ultimately get along with each other. It was the same kind of thing. And Cat, if we were on the during the summertime, we were out on the deck sitting in a chair, he'd come over and jump in our lap. So he had wormed his way into the family, and we were happy to have him around, but he never came in the house, not one single time in all those years.
Yeah, I have a friend who has basically taken care of an outdoor cat, that she very similarly inherited, basically came and showed up, you know, was at her door one day. And I think it's also been like years and years, has never come in the house. She has another cat.
Yep.
They'll stand and like through the screen door or whatever, or through the window screen, and they'll talk to each other.
Right.
But really is very happy being outside and, you know, getting food and how whatever he finds for shelter, but has never come inside.
Yeah.
And yeah, Tonka doesn't understand sometimes when we go to friends' houses that have cats that they don't want to play. Like he thinks all cats are friendly because he had two. So he's very big. And my friend has two small dogs and takes care of her grand kitty a lot. And so what ends up happening is when he goes over and he sees Frankie, Frankie's like, what is this giant thing? Because he's used to a dachshund and a chihuahua. You know, it's very funny. And Tonka's like, but I want to play. I want to play.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, but he takes it's very funny when he goes there. It's really because her small dog, the chihuahua, is very much the alpha, like is really an alpha. And
Yeah.
Tonka loves going there because it's like he's on vacation. It's hysterical. He's like, I don't have a job when I'm here. So every toy comes out. He's bouncing, like he's just so happy and bouncy, where I think that at home he feels like he has a job and he takes that job very seriously.
Sure.
And so he will be very he's much more on guard at home than he is anywhere else. It's very interesting.
Well, talking again about cat personalities and, you know, antagonistic relationships and what have you. We got another kitten from a neighbor friend, and we lovingly named her Normal. You know, the witless cat on I think on the Garfield comic strip. So Normal became this little gray sweet girl kitty cat. And of course, we didn't get her spayed in time, and she wound up getting pregnant. And so what happened then was she went through her term and everything, and it was around this time of the year we had a Christmas tree, and she was over behind a chair in this room, you know, over there making these kind of sobbing noises, right? And so we got some towels and whatnot and, you know, put them underneath her, made her comfortable and everything. And then all of a sudden, the first kitten starts to come out, and it's not good. It's the hind legs.
Mm.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do I know about birthing no cat babies, right? So I called up a good friend of mine who was our family vet, who we were on, you know, mileage points with because of all of the business we'd done with him. And I said, well, what do I do? And he said, you got to get that kitten out of there. You're going to lose them all. And so I said, well, okay, I can see the hind feet. And he said, just do yourself, you know, pull gently but firmly, and just keep, you know, moving back, you know, a little bit at a time. And it took almost a half hour to get that kitten out of there. And do you remember the movie City Slickers?
Mm-hmm.
The calf that was born breech, what his name was Norman.
Norman, that's right. I love Norman. That's
So
right.
that was the kitty cat's name, was Norman. And I successfully got it out. I called the vet back, and he said, you know something, in that type of situation, it is so easy, you know, to break the spine or, you know, something else. You know, sometimes it goes pretty easily. He said, but what you were describing, I said, you know, it took a long time to get that kitty cat out. And I didn't know if it was going to be alive when I got it out, but of course it was. So the upshot of both of those is that Norman was kind of brain damaged for the rest of her life. I don't know if it was the lack of oxygen for a while, but she was not like any other cat that we'd ever had. And the long and the short of it was, is when she got older, if you reached down to pat her on the head, she would swipe up at you, like, you know, and try to hook you, you know. And so she was a loving cat, and my wife loves to make songs to cats and all the rest. I won't punish you with any singing, but the really great outcome is the rest of the litter. There were 4 in this litter as well. They all came, on their own. The first one was a problem, and we got through that. And do you know that bonding? She and I were like soulmates for the rest of her entire life. If I'd be sitting, in this position here watching television, and I fell asleep watching football or something like that, I would wake up with her on my chest right here with her nose about 2 or 3 inches away from mine, purring away. And my wife would look over and she'd go, she's saying, Daddy, I adore you. So no, there was a very, very strong relationship. The bonding that took place was really incredible.
Well, my cat that was a nudge was the pest was actually rescued from the roof of a construction site. Pretty much one of the guys who worked on the site, his wife was one of the technicians at the vet office I went to, and he found, I think they were probably hours old. And so when he brought them to the vet's office, they were all raised with a lot of attention because they were bottle fed, and then they were like around the vet's office being coddled by everybody who worked there. And I always say that I think that was part of the reason he was so clingy and so affection oriented, was because that's how he pretty much was raised. My other guy was a little aloof, except with me, and he used to groom me. And so it would be, he would stand on the counter and put his front paws on my shoulder, and he would like groom my hair. It would be like, okay, you're a cat too, which I think in their eyes we really are. We're just larger. I really think they think we're cats. So
the big cats, no doubt about it.
Big cats. Well, that's what it made me think of with Norman, is that you were just her mother, or her father to her anyway.
So the couple neat stories about that. A soup kitchen is non-discriminatory, and I would say that if it were a church, we had a Unitarian type of a soup kitchen, and that means that cats of all nature would show up. We had raccoons, and then what we lovingly called the ugly cat, which was a possum, and so the fun part of it is sometimes there would be a half a dozen animals on the porch at the same time. And remember, I told you the story about cats that were very similar. This new batch of kitty cats had a throwback to Nernina, Hernia Kid, and her name was Eddie. We had 2 black female cats, and we had named them both Eddie and Eddie, little Eddie and big Eddie, right? So little Eddie was fierce and ferocious, and she had that same kind of fire in her belly. She wasn't very big, probably all in maybe 8 or 9 pounds, but compared to some of our other big cats, and her brother Puffy was over 22 pounds. So the long and the short of it is, she would stay out there on that back porch while there's a family of raccoons coming up and eating, or the ugly cat would show up, but she was definitely keeping an eye on things. And sometimes she would get into an altercation, and she'd just stand her ground and they'd run away. Very fierce. So that litter of cats, as far as I was concerned, they were born here, they could live here, they could pass here, right? I came home from work one day and I found out my wife and daughters had given away Puffy, to a neighbor. And I said, well, wait a minute, Puffy's family, what are you doing? So anyway, time goes by, and Puffy's over at this house, and the folks had a child with Down syndrome. And about a year later, at school, the sister, of where Puffy was living, came to school and said, we're gonna take Puffy, and have him put down. And my older daughter Heidi comes home and says, what's going on? They're having problems with Heidi. Apparently, Puffy's scratching, the little girl with Down syndrome. And so I said, well, forget it, and we went and got Puffy immediately and said, we will take him back. Thank you for saying something to us before taking any action. We get him home and he's hostile. I mean, you try to give him a treat or feed him or anything like that, and just, and he's a big boy. I'm sure he's scared what out of that little girl. So I'm looking at him. I'm looking at his behavior, and he's eating funny. He's not chewing the way a regular cat chews. And I said, I'm not sure, but he might have an abscess or something in his mouth. Well, sure enough, took him over to the vet. By this time, we've moved on to another vet, and we helped them put their kids through college. So we take him over. They clean his mouth. They put him on antibiotics and all the rest of them. 3 days later, he's back to being that big, gentle giant, quietly sitting there purring. And he was so funny, Jan. He'd hop up on one of our stools around the island that we have in the kitchen, and he'd sit there and he'd put his paws up in the air like this, waiting for us to come over and give him a treat. And he was a big boy, and just so much love, and so fun. But we felt good that we had gotten him back, and the family was now intact. We had the litter back together again.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many nuggets in that. One is sometimes when there are drastic personality changes, you have to really look to physical health, because usually if their behavior changes so dramatically, so quickly, there's a reason. I had a conversation with my cousin who was rehoming one of their dog for biting their daughter a few times. And I said, well, it was hard for me to tell what exactly had happened, but I was kind of like, well, what was surrounding that behavior? Because it's not common behavior. And for an animal that tends to be a certain personality to all of a sudden have such a dramatic shift doesn't seem very like there's an underlying cause of some form. And I love the idea of begging, because they're so smart and they realize what will get them a treat. I remember years ago when I had my first dog, we're walking one day and she finds a bone on the street, and I had a thing, I didn't like them to eat food that they found on the ground or whatever, so I told her to drop it, and as a reward, I had a treat in my pocket and I gave her a treat. Well, the next day we're walking the same route, and she goes up to the bone, she takes it in her mouth, flings it out of her mouth, and then comes and sits by me. It's kind of like, for a treat. It was kind of like, see, I can do, I don't need like direction. I can do that again. And it was absolutely so funny, because they're so much smarter than we are.
Yeah. So through probably the next 10 or 12 years after that time, most of the cats that were outside, at one point we had over 20 that were in the yard, counting our 8 indoor outdoor cats. And then a little bit later on, we were down past when all of those had lived their lives, and had gotten two kitty cats around I don't know, 2001 to 2003, and then a third one. And then they outlived all the rest of those cast members. And one of them, the female, wound up going, my sister and her husband lived here for a few years, and they wound up getting a big, beautiful RV and heading out on the road. And so we gave them that cat, and she thrived with them for another 8 or 9 years. She was almost 20 years old when she passed us last summer. And the other thing is that our last 2 boys, they were hard, because we were completely bonded with them. They were with us everywhere, and that was TJ and Boo. And we had both of them just under 20 years. We made many trips back and forth, driving in the van with them, in tow, in their cat carriers, with a covered cat box inside the van as well. And there are just many stories, the very funny kind of things like that. But their personalities, we used to call Boo the worm, because he would find a way to just kind of innocuously get up on a lap, warm himself in, and then start purring and be warm and everything, which means that within 15 minutes we'd be fast asleep. He just put us right out. And during that period of time, TJ, who was this big, beautiful Maine Coon cat, absolutely gorgeous black and white fur. He had these white stripes on his back legs, which we called Nike pants, right? And so he was always kind of standoffish, and he wouldn't sit on our lap. He wasn't really a lap kitty cat at all. But Boo always had one of us or the other occupied. So finally, about 3 years ago, Boo starts his long exit from this island home, and develops kidney problems, and we go through an extended period of time of trying to do whatever we can to keep the quality of life good for him, including bringing bags of Ringer's fluid home and injecting a subcutaneous, and he would fight us like crazy. I mean, unbelievable. So we ended up losing him, and then it was just TJ and me, because Mom had gotten a job with the census, and was out all over New England, doing cleanup on census taking. And TJ decided he was a lap cat, and he and I bonded like crazy. But I don't know if you know the temperament of Maine Coon cats. First of all, they are extremely intelligent. And we found these little cat toy mice that were black and white with a pink nose, and my sister called them mini me's because they looked like a miniature TJ, right? So we would get as many as 4 or 5 of those out, and for him to play with, and he would take them and he would line them up in a circle, or he'd put them in a straight line, nose to tail, all the way down. And at night, he would go down one at a time, bring those mini me's up into the hall outside of our bedroom door, and then he would, wail and screech and act like he had just taken down, an elk or something, But that silly boy, every single morning, we would come back down, and after he had dragged all of them upstairs, they were back down here in some sort of formation. Unbelievable.
I had two cat stories like that. So one of my cats, when I was living in Brooklyn Heights, my cat that I got there, I didn't allow him in my bedroom, and I had these hardwood floors, and there was like a space, so it wasn't flush with the floor. And at night, he would get change out of the change bowl and slide it and bat it under the door. So all of a sudden you'd see like a quarter fly across. And we used to always say that he was paying tolls, that he would be like, okay, and same cat had a thing about my socks, and literally, I think he thought they were rodents or animals, and I would wake up in the morning and there would be piles of socks near my head that he would bring me as gifts, I guess. And I was always thankful I didn't have mice or something, because I thought I would probably wake up with mice near my head. But it was so funny that he would always do that. And my cats my more recent cats, I don't remember doing things like that, but he had this personality. And I had a really close friend that had a Maine Coon cat, and all I remember is that he used to headbutt a lot. Like he would stand next to your leg and he would like headbutt, and it was so powerful, like it could knock you over. Like because they're so big and they're really strong, and it would be like, whoa, buddy, and he would headbutt.
He was kind of an interesting cat also, because he had the temperament of like a border collie. He was a herder, and he was always, we called him our watch cat, right, instead of a watchdog. And when the two of us were in different rooms, say I'm in the living room, we've got a foyer, and then we got a dining room, and the door into the dining room also has another door into the kitchen. So he'd go and find a spot where he could look into the kitchen and see what Jan was doing, and then look over and see what I was doing in here. So he had us covered. unbelievably, smart cat.
Yeah, they are extremely observant when since all my cats were indoor cats, and they would sit there,
Right.
and one of my cats would stand by the back door and watch the dog go out and then cry because she was outside, or like wanted her to come back in. And I
Right.
just remember as like one day she just ran out after him, which I wasn't expecting, and then kind of freaked out. She was like, "Oh my gosh, what did I do?" And I'm like, "You're the one who ran out. Like, I didn't
Yeah.
tell you to go outside." But they had never been outside. They were purely indoor cats. And so I think outdoors was quite overwhelming. So, but I lived in a pretty heavily trafficked area, and I just decided it was safer to have an indoor cat than an outdoor cat, just because there was so much car traffic and everything. I just didn't want
Well,
to.
the thing of it is because from 2005 to about 2013, we spent more time at our home in Florida than the one here in Connecticut. And so when we had our cats with us down there, the two that we had were Boo and TJ. And of course, we never let our cats go outside down in Florida. We always have these stories, neighbors and all this kind of stuff. Well, my cat didn't come home, and I said, "You dumbass, what do you think? We've got freaking eagles and peregrine falcons and about 19 other. They're at the bottom of the food chain down here. I mean, we've got real wildlife running around. So no, if you love your kitty cat, you keep them indoors. And so we would let them out every once in a while up here in Connecticut, but we were kind of standoffish with them wanting to go out so much. And one night, T didn't come home, and so we were, he came home every single time we let him out. No problem at all. Came home the following morning, dragging his big, beautiful tail behind him, and it had been bit through in two spots. Probably the distance between them was the size of maybe a big dog or a coyote's mouth. And we're thinking, that beautiful tail saved his life, because whatever it was going to eat him. And he got away, and the rest is history. We had to take him in and have it amputated. So it was kind of funny watching him get used to not having that tail, because anybody who's got a Maine Coon cat knows that does a lot of different things in terms of balance, and also, when communicating, right? So he would be lying on the floor, sometimes on his back with his belly, which kind of looked like ram fleece, that kind of look, right? And then all of a sudden I would say, TJ is a good cat. And then tail go flick, flick.
I love what I always say. It doesn't matter what you say. It just matters what the tone you have when you say it, because I'll be on a meeting, or like this morning, I'm on a class, and one of my students has a lovely little miniature poodle. And I have a pet voice that comes out. It's like a baby voice. And Tonka will hear that tone, and he comes flying into the room. It's like, who are you talking to? That's not me.
Yeah.
But it is hysterical when my voice changes, and all of a sudden his tail will get really excited, or he starts to trot like he's prancing.
Yeah.
And it's just so funny because they can automatically tell what you're saying.
Yeah.
Or the tone, or how you are. And the other thing about a tail, yes, it does distort their balance if they don't have a tail. The other thing is it's actually one of their weapons. So it's a method of protection.
Sure.
If you've ever gotten hit by a tail, like really hard, it's a great way to stun or to knock something off. And so all of a sudden they feel a little bit more vulnerable.
Yeah, that's funny. You just reminded me of an altercation between Sieber, Thiebington, Patches, Pachulo, all that, and Boo, when Boo was just an upstart, probably, adolescent kitty cat. Boo would get in Sieber's face. Sieber would stand there stoically, and he'd take it up to a point, and then all of a sudden, I mean, faster than lightning, he'd reach a paw out and flip Boo on his back. Get away from me, you.
I know you're being a pest. I've had enough. Yeah, it's when I got my one of my last cats, and Casey, my dog, was 14, and I had had a cat, and I'm like, oh my God, she's going to be lonely by herself. She needs a companion. So I got a kitten.
Yeah.
And I swear that she like would look at me like, Mom, what were you thinking? This thing
Yeah.
is such a pest, because the kitten would not leave her alone. And she was 14 years old. I mean, she was an older senior dog, and she was like, I don't need a pest, thanks. I was really happy before. But I had this, and they ended up getting along fine, but it was hysterical because she would look at me, because at the one point or another they're kittens, and then all of a sudden they're kittens in large bodies. Like they grow, but they still have that kitten personality.
Do.
So my mother would say to me, how are they? And I'd be like, they're just larger and destructive, said, as opposed to, when they're small, they don't really cause that much damage.
Yeah.
But when they're big, and then you start to learn how to decorate around cats or animals, because I would learn that there were certain things that just weren't good to have around with them in the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so why not for the past few years? Like, what was it? Just the connection and the loss after the last two, or was it just that you didn't want to have?
You're reading my mind. I mean, the whole point is why are you cat people for 40 years and then all of a sudden, well, no, we've had our heart broken so many times. There's no such thing as having a pet. They're family members and they're people too, And in some cases, some of the animals would pass when we were in Florida, and our family that was living here. Sometimes it was one of my daughters, and then, like as I mentioned earlier, my sister and her brother or her husband, brother-in-law. And unfortunately, that would happen, and we'd come back, and we would, that they're not here anymore would just, it would scream, But the last three that we ended up losing, especially Boo and TJ, with everything, the extraordinary measures that we went to, had it not been a good quality of life for Boo the last 3 or 4 months after we gave him ringer's fluid, after we did, whatever, and we would have had him put down, because we didn't want him to suffer. But he was really a trooper. And when he did finally go, I found him, face down in the water dish, out in the kitchen, and he was struggling to get up, and he started to pee. So I went in and I put him in the cat box so that he could, finish his job there. When the kidneys go, they're peeing all the time, and they're just not retaining any of the moisture. So anyway, he falls down in the cat box, and I clean him up as much as I can, and I bring him back out, and I put him on my lap on a towel, and he looks up at me, and he's just so forlorn. And then I said, Boo, it's okay. You've been a champion. You have really, really fought hard to stay in this life, and it's okay for you to go. He looked up at me, he put his head down, and he passed. And it still chokes me up. So I know that when you get a new family member, you're lighting the fuse for when your heart is going to be broken, right? So the other part of it is we had integrated both of these guys, into our. So to kind of pick the thought back up, we had integrated both of these guys into all our travel plans. We took them with us, after probably 2 years before they were close to being, in health problems. We just wanted them with us all the time. We did not want to leave them, at what we called the resort. We had a really good one over in Wellington here, and it worked for a while, but no. So now I'm looking at Jan after T was gone, the last one, and I said, we need to take a break just for a little while, and let's figure out what we're going to do with our lives, what we want to be when we grow up, where we want to be, and then when it's time to have an animal again, we'll know. And that's kind of the space that we're in right now. Is we've got all these beautiful memories, a lot of family love, a lot of I have no idea how many animals have lived in this home over the last 130 years, but it's probably been a lot, right? So we travel, and cats would probably be the way to go, because poor dogs, they don't like to go to kennels, and it's harder on dogs than it is on cats. And cats, we could set up a dish with we had a dish that used these 2-liter bottles for water. That would be a week's worth of water, for a couple of cats. And then we had the feeder. So if we wanted to go for a day or two, or maybe even on the outside 3 days, we knew they would be okay. But we'd typically have somebody just stop by and make sure that, there wasn't any problems. But cats are cats, but dogs, that's not fair to them.
Yeah, I on the side, I now do quite a bit of dog sitting, and I haven't kenneled Tonka in a long time. He goes to a woman and stays at her house with her dogs when I happen to travel. A wonderful woman he absolutely adores, and when I can, I bring him with me. It's just, when I was a kid, we traveled with our cats, but as an adult, I've always had people come in and take care of them when I'm not here, right, when I've had cats through the years. But it is a responsibility, just like any, like you said, they're a member of the family. So providing for their care is just part of our responsibility to them. Yeah, when you take them in.
Yeah. I am happy to appreciate other people's animals when I visit their homes.
That's right. I was going to say that. That's the time when being a as my mother says, she loves her grand dog, and so that's the part when being a grandparent is really helpful. Or going to a friend's house that has a pet, and you're like, okay, I can live through them vicariously, and I don't need I can go over and adore as much as I want. And I don't have to have one myself.
And I don't know how or why kids and dogs have always loved me. I've never had a bad interaction with a dog in the last 30 years. Snarling, angry dogs, I can calm them right down.
Well, it's always interesting because my brother's been bitten and was bitten by a dachshund like 3 times. And it's just so funny, just a dachshund. So he's never been a dog guy, as opposed to I'm the exact opposite. I would probably go up to anything, especially as a kid. If it wasn't if it had a tail, I was going to go up and pet it. And my mother would yell at me all the time. You don't know they're friendly. And I'll be like, oh, but it's a dog, or it's a cat.
Well, I can't tell you if it was watching Caesar, the dog whisperer, but even before that, I know that, that posture is a very big communication, to a dog. And it is important to be the alpha dog and to give the direction and for it to be safe and okay for the dog. And so it's kind of the same thing with kids. I speak fluent baby, and absolutely, my dog's not bad, but it's probably not as good as my baby is.
Your baby is. Well, this has been so much fun, and I hope people have enjoyed hearing all these cat stories. And I'm sure that you have your own, and we would love to hear some of them. If you want to comment, that would be great. But thank you so much, Bill, for coming on and sharing all these great stories through the years and all your cat experiences.
You make it very easy. We're buddies, and we will be for the rest of our lives. And I really appreciate your time, Jan.
And to everybody else out there, thanks for listening, and hopefully connect with us in some form. Have a great day.
You've been listening to Pets, People, Life, and Longevity, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch every episode at exvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcast app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and wherever you find podcasts.